good morning, everybody, and welcome to Tech Care. Today we have none other than the handsome-looking and brilliant Charles Armitage with us today from Florence. Good morning, Charles.
Good morning, Morton. Handsome is a bit of an overstatement, but
well, I can see you here, so I know what I'm talking about. So are you tired? You've been to the Future 50 dinner last night. How was it?
I was at the Future 50 dinner, Morton. It was great, thank you. I'm not tired. I'm full of energy and ready to go. But we got accepted onto this program run by Tech Nation, which is supported by the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, to help support growth stage tech companies in the UK and help them navigate some scaling challenges. So we were at the launch party of that last night, or launch dinner last night, and it was fantastic. I met some really interesting people and really excited about the program, what it can help us achieve.
I can totally get that. I wish that was me. But hey, tell us a bit more about then. I'm 100% sure everybody that's listening in now will think about having seen perhaps a post on Florence attracting a hell of a lot of funding this year. Tell us a bit about what's the plans.
What's the plans? So we raised a round of venture financing in this Q2 this year, so just before the summer, of some new investors, which was really, really exciting. It was like definitely a good validation for the team of the work we've been doing so far. So it was really great to get that over the line. But we've we've raised this money, and we've got 4 things we want to do, and I guess it's all about taking more steps towards the goal of what we want to be, which is the technology that powers the health and care workforce. And we are deploying it in four things, actually. So the first is UK social care. So that really is our home and something that I think we're quite good at, I think, and hopefully have some happy customers. And we want to grow that more in UK social care, bring on more nurses, more care workers, more care providers, and help them manage some of the challenges that they're facing with their workforce at the moment. So that's kind of our number one priority. But we're also using the money to explore some other avenues. So we want to start working a bit more with the NHS, which is not only a very small scale customer of ours at the moment. And we think there's some interesting things we can do to help workforce challenges within the public sector. We want to expand internationally, so we're launching in France, across France and Germany and Canada at the moment.
Whoa.
And we're also, the thing I'm most excited about actually is what we're doing with our academy, our learning platform, which is the fourth thing, which is we want to create or are creating ideally the go-to portfolio management and learning platform for health and social care workers across the world, actually.
That sounds fantastic. Let's stay with that a bit. What can a person do with that academy?
What can a person do with Academy? Well, today, Academy, you can just do training and e-learning. It's all free. There's a load of really good content in there. And the origin story of Academy was we needed something to help us train our own nurses and care workers that we use in Florence. And so we created a platform, created some great content with some really, really awesome authors. And we put it out there on the internet, and it started to be picked up loads by people across the world, especially in non-UK countries. So by far and away, it's our most popular product. We've got hundreds of thousands of users on it. And so we're trying to, but it's all free. So it costs a huge amount of money to provide that.
Monetize later.
We're not too worried about monetizing, because I think, at our core, we all love learning and development. We think it's a really, really important thing for the sector for us to help do that better. So beyond making money out of it, we're quite driven by that as a mission.
Yeah.
But then there's also an opportunity, we think, to if we can create the ecosystem for learning and development care, then the knock-on effects that would be really, really consequential, I think. So that's a really exciting program for us. So today, e-learning mainly within the platform, but moving much more towards helping train people when they're coming into care, bringing new starters into care, and also helping people upskill and professionally develop once they're in the system.
You used the word origin. Let's go back to the whole origin. You were a doctor.
Yes,
You are still, but you're not working as one.
correct.
What happened then?
So that was back in 2016 or 2016, 2017. I was a doctor. I was doing my surgical training. So I was really keen on being a trauma surgeon. And that was the path I'd taken in life. And I kind of semi fell into Florence a bit by accident. So I was working in a department that had a really big reliance on agency staff, temporary staff. And the whole way that was set up was really inefficient, right? So we had these staffing agencies that were extremely expensive, getting new people in every day, didn't necessarily know the department. I would even sometimes then pick up weekends or holidays for some more pocket money, pick up agency shifts elsewhere. And I thought, well, that's kind of a pretty weird way to do it when I could be, yeah, exactly, bad for the system, bad for the workers, bad for the hospitals, bad for the patients, bad for the residents. So, and then with my co-founder, Dan, I was kicking around an idea of how we could solve with technology. And I met my co-founder, Dan, who was coincidentally doing the same thing. He kind of comes more from the care provider side of the equation. And so we got together in 2016 and we started to throw the idea around a bit and started to build a product. And it was a disaster, but it was, I guess the kernel of an idea, and it launched us off. And I think relatively quickly and early on in the journey, what became a sort of a bit of a side project hobby grew some legs, and I decided to pursue it. I mean, I didn't consciously, I'd say, quit being a doctor or stop being a doctor. It was in my mind a temporary thing that I was going to be coming back to once I'd scratched the itch. But almost 6 years later now, I'm still doing it.
Yeah, that's a real startup story. And you mentioned Dan now, and obviously he's not with us here today, although I think
Rest
that
in
could be
peace.
fun. Yeah, but tell us a bit more about that dynamic duo. How did you meet, and what were the first conversations, and also a bit about Dan's background, because I know he came from a totally different.
Yeah, we met. We were sort of introduced by my aunt's friends, sons, whatever, sort of mutual connection, and we it was like almost like speed dating. I remember felt like a blind date. We went to met at a pub in South London and had a few drinks and started to talk about understand each other and understand our backgrounds, and realized we were kind of both thinking and aware of the same problem but from different sides. So I was a doctor. Dan was at the time working in. He was originally in the military, then working in financial services, but does some charity work where he was like a non-executive director of a housing charity that ran some care homes. So was coming at the staff and was experiencing a lot of those staffing challenges from the provider side. And that's originally how he kind of came up with the idea. So it was quite a good, I guess, sort of like, customer match. We both understood either side of the customer.
Yeah.
And I guess we didn't know it at the time, but as much as he annoys me, like we're a pretty good values match. So we both think about we both have fairly similar ideas of what we think is important in life, and respect for the sector and respect for people that work in it. Really being all about the customer, and often trying to do just the right thing and have fun while doing it. So we're a good match from that point of view.
Yeah, I've met the two of you together, and you certainly seem like a good match. Also, yeah.
Mm.
So you meet, and you have a great sort of first iteration on the product. It doesn't really come through. There's no commercialization to begin with. Then what happens?
Well, we didn't really have a great first iteration on the product. The original deal was Dan's a bit older and he's got a family, and he had at the time quite a sort of stable job. So the original deal was for the first few months he put a bit of capital in, and I kind of did some of the quit my job, and essentially he joined pretty sharpish after that. But the first little bit of money that he put in, neither of us knew anything about building a tech product. I mean, I still don't really know much about it, but so we went and we tried to find a freelancer on the internet to build this idea we had for, temporary staff for marketplace for healthcare, social care. And we didn't have very much money, and we had a list of 1,000 things we needed to do. And we found someone on the internet who would do it, and it was an absolute disaster. We hadn't been, so kind of got it delivered to us, and it just didn't work. We hadn't really used it, developed it with users. We hadn't really done any testing. We hadn't done anything like an MVP. We kind of just said, this is what we think it should look like. Go and build it and come back to us. So completely the wrong thing to do.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and ended up having to throw it in the bin. So all of that money we spent on that product we threw away. But ultimately, it was for the best, because it meant that we were then at the point where we didn't have a product. We were kind of half baked, half pregnant, as it were, and we ended up by that point we got some potential early customers, and so we ended up our MVP. We threw that product out the window, and our MVP was just a Google Sheet. So we hacked together kind of functionality with Google Sheets and Zapier links and all those kind of like fun little techie things you can use, and it worked, and the kind of customers liked it, and it kind of, I guess, validated the idea, and was actually ultimately, obviously, the thing we should have done first off before we did build any kind of product was sit with some users and test stuff out and see what we could do. And it was enough to then get those early customers, get a bit of validation, get a bit of like trading through this early platform, and then we raised a little bit more money off the back of that, and then used that to hire our own team. We went from there. So it was a strong early lesson in how not to do things.
Yeah, it sounds very familiar, and having spoken to quite a lot of people, just of course on this show, but also off it, yeah, there are some really cool products also being made today who started just like this, and now perhaps just right now doing exactly what you've done.
Yeah, totally.
It's not on the same, the same product.
So we did that, and then what happened? And then we raised a bit more money, and then hired some great people who kind of, again, didn't really know anything at the time. So people who had a few scar tissues from kind of previous tech kind of startups, and we went from there. And then just slowly and steadily you build more customers, you listen to them, you do things to try and help them, you put the customers first, and you build a team around that, and here we are today.
So what's the first
Simple.
chapter? What's the first, like, can you remember or recall the feeling you have of some kind of an interaction or a validation throughout that like early years still, where you can see that now someone's actually telling you directly or indirectly, this has a huge potential, this is going to actually fly in some capacity?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I used to, in the early days, because obviously when in the early days when things don't work that well, you trade a lot on your relationships with people. So developing really close, strong relationships with your customers is really key. Mm-hmm. And so in the early days, the first sort of nurses we had on the platform, you drive them to a shift, or go meet them for a drink, or whatever, because it's a great learning opportunity as well, and you develop quite strong relationships with them. So I think through developing those relationships, I think we realized pretty quickly that we were onto something. And then I guess it was definitely like a strong commercial validation. I remember like the strongest commercial validation we got, which was within our first year, one of our biggest kind of like enterprise customers, big CarePen Group, wanted to roll that out across their whole company. So obviously we were sort of like, heads exploded, but that was great, because it was a real sort of like, oh, this is actually a serious company with some serious people that work there who are getting value from this. So I would definitely remember that moment.
Yeah. So fast forwarding to today's workforce climate and really crisis, is that an okay word to use?
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
What's up and what's down?
We are operating in a uniquely supply short or worker short crisis at the moment, and the headwinds that we've got against us are ginormous. And I'm normally a really optimistic person, but I don't really see how we're going to get out of it at the moment. I think I've got an idea, but I don't think it's going to be easy to put into practice. And what's happening out there is we've got a huge requirement for increasing people working within health and particularly social care. With the number of people living longer and longer with increasing care needs is just going up massively. And if you look at the kind of like demographic population periods, that bulge of people who are entering like that caring needs stage is absolutely huge.
Yeah.
And there are many stats and projections around the kind of like increasing care workforce we're going to need over the next 10, 20, 30 years. But then we're just completely not on top of how we train or sort of like bring people into the sector, train them, develop them, and value them to the point where we retain them within the sector. And then you've got these big societal headwinds like, post-Brexit reduction in free movement of people, burnout post-COVID, people leaving the sector, wage inflation in competing sectors like retail and hospitality, and the inability of care providers because of the amounts of money they're getting from local authorities to kind of meet those increasing demands for wages, all mean that we're having this massive exodus of people from the workforce. Yeah. And we're not doing anything to stem that or to kind of plug the gap.
I can follow you, and I definitely see this issue, of course, across our customer board as well, that it takes priority right now. It's something that's so dire that it's got to be addressed. And I think you're right. We can't sit around and wait for a political climate to solve this for us altogether. And one stroke, that's simply perhaps never going to happen. So
the problem is that sort of the political climate is all very much focused on the end, like service user, the patient or the resident, and a lot of the narratives around things like the cost of care, super important, or the quality of care, super important, but really a lot of that dialogue, I think, at a political level misses, I think, the most important driver of quality and within the system, which is like the workforce. And okay, there have been some initiatives recently around improving access to healthcare worker visas for people across the world, which is a good step. There's obviously some negative points around that of taking healthcare workers out of other countries that also need healthcare workers.
Yeah.
But essentially, what needs to happen is we need to wholesale change the way we think about the way we value work and care and the remuneration and sort of and respect that those positions hold.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm actually long term relatively bullish on it though. So we're in this really tricky spot at the moment, but there are a lot of jobs as well that in the next 10, 20, 30 years are going to be automated away. So taxi drivers will at some point relatively soon no longer exist because cars will self-drive. A lot of jobs in things like retail and hospitality will become challenged as the way that we entertain ourselves and shop changes. Doctors are like increasingly being at least optimized, if not replaced, by machine learning, artificial intelligence, and improved systems. So, but the last job that we're going to manage to automate away by far is definitely care work, because no matter how good your robot is, it's not going to be as good at showing empathy, compassion, care, holding someone's hand, and guiding them through like life's challenging moments. So for me, we as a society need to jump on that transition and realise that caring for our people, vulnerable people in our population, is the most important job that we're going to need to do, and we need to wake up and start appreciating and remunerating that workforce for the work they do.
That was some speech. I could hear that in one of the houses. Come on with it, Charles.
Okay.
No, but you're really right, and I think contradictory to what you're saying, a lot of people in care sometimes, when we implement Sequoia, or I'm pretty sure that you've come across it too, feel scared or frightened that actually when we do things digitally instead of on paper or whatever it is, then what's it going to do to the need for me being here? But obviously it's not going to do anything to that. It's only going to help and support you and amplify what you're doing really well already. And I think that's a really good point. And to our producer, Balo, this is definitely going to be the headline for the show, isn't it? Charles, I think it's also a really good place to end our conversation this morning. Any last words?
Just that it's been a pleasure to be here, Morten. I'm very grateful for the work that you do and for having me on your show. And I look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you. That's heartwarming. Everybody, have a nice Saturday. Talk soon. Bye.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, review, and share your favorite Take Care podcast with your friends and colleagues. Until we meet next week, take care.